Isaiah 9:6, a very entrapping verse, dangerous, because it's one of the favorites of Christianity to point at what they would claim is to be the Messiah to come. One of the first major problems you'll want to look into with that idea is the tense of the verbs used in that verse. So you have what's known as present tense, or you have known what is future tense, let's say. And in this verse only, there are many other places where this tense of verb, this exact word, is used in your Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament. And although the Christian writings, every one of them, agree that it is to be written as in present tense. Which, by the way, when it translates into English, it's actually more along the lines of a past tense to our vernacular. I'll explain to you in just a second here. But in this verse, they go with the future tense. Christian translators do. What do I mean by that? I mean, like it says, the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called. That's future tense. So you don't find that. And there's a couple other terms in there that they alter. As far as I'm concerned, they alter. So it says that for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called blah, blah, blah. Okay? I'll get to another section on that in a minute, but let me give you this. You can find this in the Rotherham Emphasized Bible. Okay, this is a standard English translation, Protestant put out. It says, for a child hath been born to us, a son hath been given to us, and the dominion is upon his shoulder, and his name hath been called, blah, blah, blah. So, you say, well, what's the big deal with that? Why would it be present? Because it's talking about Hezekiah. So Hezekiah turns out to be one of the most righteous ones. This is during the time of the Syrian invasion. And you remember, the Assyrian captivity took place, and all of the northern kingdom, except for a small percentage of Israelites, were taken captive and moved into, very close to the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. Okay, well that's not all he done, and your Bible tells you this, but he also went down and he went into the southern kingdom, house of Judah territory, and he took captive many of the Yehudites, tribe of Judah, and many of the Levites, and many of the Benjamites. Okay, and so actually, I think history says he took over 40 cities, captured over 40 cities in the southern kingdom, and then he was encompassed round about Jerusalem, starving them out. Hezekiah's in there praying, and Yahweh heard his prayer. And what did he do? What did Yahweh do for him? He drove the entire military force. Whether he turned them on one another, or he had Malachim come down and kill them all off, who knows? You can go read the details there. I think that's the scene where the lepers were about to die, and they said, well, hey, we're about to die. We need to go over and see if they'll give us some food. They went over the hillside there, and poof, they noticed all of them were dead. So, anyway, he seems to me to be giving praise to Hezekiah. Now, guess what Hezekiah's name basically means? Yeah. The mighty God. Or it can be translated, the mighty God. Or something to that effect. Like, for example, you'll find that I think it's strength of God, or some strength of Yah, rather. And that's why his name shall be called Hezekiah. In essence, is what that's saying, not the mighty God or the mighty Yah, or the strength of God. Actually, it can just as well be translated Hezekiah. But regardless, yeah, it's talking about Hezekiah, it seems like. Now, one other little point before I get too movie here. There are other versions out there of this verse, which tells me, or smacks of, or smells like, somebody's been battling with it, altering it. Okay? give you a prime example. And remember what I told you also. This is Isaiah Chapter 9, verse 5 in your Jewish literature. It is not Isaiah 9:6 in Jewish literature. They change something in verse 1. They break it up differently in verse 1 in this chapter, and that's why the number scheme is slightly different between the versions. But you go over to Brenton's Septuagint. Remember, the Septuagint was translated, supposedly, back in the BC period. I know that generally because they only originally translated the first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, with Ptolemy. It was later that there were other books added to the translation in the Greek. That's why I said in the BC period. So Isaiah was not originally translated with Ptolemy's command to translate a Greek version. And remember, it is a Hellenized Greek version. So that's why I don't really care too much for the Brenton edition, or rather the Septuagint itself. Now, on this Brenton edition, let me read it to you out of Brenton. It says, "For a child is born to us, and a son is given to us, whose government is upon his shoulder," present tense, "and his name is called the Messenger of Great Counsel, for I will bring peace upon the princes and help to him." Now, listen, I don't know if you noticed it, right? Go back and listen to that again if you can, but it's not as flamboyant, for sure, as what the Hebrew version, current Hebrew version of it is. And let me see here. I'm going to go over here to Adam Clark's commentary. He says, right down here, he says, the Septuagint has, quote, "the messenger of the great council," unquote, as part of that name. On where it says the everlasting Father, it says the Septuagint uses the messenger of the great council. So, it's definitely a phrase that would point to Hezekiah. Okay? But he goes on and he says, the helping Father is also a translation that is in some Hebrew versions. And he says, evidently, the corruption of some. So, he's telling you that this verse here has been corrupted in certain translations. He's telling you that the Septuagint is totally different on this verse. So, whatever your conclusion on Isaiah 9:6, whatever the conclusion of some Christians that may be out there demanding that it refers to the Messiah, and is a prophecy of the Messiah, and if you don't see it, then they get all hyper about it. It is definitely not a passage that you want to build and, establish your faith upon. Oh, why? Well, because it's been tainted and corrupted, that's why. So, I wouldn't put too much strength on this passage for establishing a doctrine, let's say it that way. And yet that you see exactly the reason why they would, and you can go in your Christian commentaries and you will read the majority of them. Well, man, this is referring to the Messiah, no doubt, and if you don't believe it, there's something wrong with you, et cetera. Something a Trinitarian would love to hear, right? So, this is, that's my position. I believe it's probably referring to Hezekiah, because the tense of those verbs demands present tense.